You have come to the right place to get fully informed on one of the most significant cultural touchstones in modern cinema.
We're getting into a film that really changed everything.
We are. It's an extensive exploration of the history, the cultural context, and the incredible, enduring influence of the 1994 film Pulp Fiction.
And this is a movie that, by almost all accounts, it fundamentally altered Hollywood. It's often cited as the single most influential American film of its decade.
It really is.
Our mission today is to give you a complete understanding of why this film matters so much, beyond its story.
Right, not just the plot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're going to break down how it went from being just a genre film to a genuine touchstone of postmodern film.
And what that meant.
And what that meant for the business of independent cinema, for the idea of the anti-hero, and crucially, for the careers of its stars, some of which were just spectacularly resurrected.
And just to be clear, for everyone listening, we are intentionally avoiding a simple plot recap. The story itself is famously fragmented.
Told completely out of chronological order.
Right, following its three main protagonists, Vincent Vega, Jules Winfield, and Butch Coolidge. But like you said, the plot is almost secondary to the style and the impact.
It is. Understanding that unique narrative structure, the way it weaves together four separate crime tales, that was central to how it was received by critics. That fragmentation is where it gets its energy.
That chaotic structure is actually announced right from the very beginning. It sets the tone perfectly.
It does. The film opens with a title card, and it gives two dictionary definitions of the word pulp.
The first one is moist, shapeless matter.
And the other defines it as lurid stories printed on cheap paper. This immediately tells you what the aesthetic is. It's saying the material is inherently messy, it's cheap, but it's also vital and culturally significant.
It's high-concept art built on low-art inspiration.
Exactly. It sets the stage for a film that treats what some might call trash culture as high scripture.
So we're going to break down the sources and the facts surrounding this movie and really try to understand what made it such a game changer for the entire industry.
Okay, let's unpack the creation story because it starts in the most fittingly pulp place imaginable.
It really does. The film's roots, they trace all the way back to the late 1980s. The writer and co-writer Roger Avary were working together at a classic cultural institution of that era.
The video store.
The video store, Video Archives in Southern California.
And that background is just so key to understanding the film's DNA. It wasn't just a part-time job for them.
No, it was an education. They were completely immersed every single day in the entire history of cinema. The obscure B-movies, the foreign thrillers, the exploitation flicks.
All of it.
And all of that created a very specific, shared cinematic language that fed directly into the script.
Their initial idea was for a trilogy of short films.
That's right, inspired by the structure of the 1963 Italian horror anthology Black Sabbath. I love that linkage, the idea of three distinct stories that are still thematically linked. And even the project's working title, Black Mask, was a direct homage.
It was, yeah. It was a nod to the hugely influential hard-boiled crime fiction magazine. So the self-awareness was there right from the very beginning.
Absolutely.
The writing process was genuinely collaborative, especially in the early stages. Avary was responsible for the foundation of one of the key storylines.
The Gold Watch storyline.
Exactly. The arc centered around Butch Coolidge. That was based on a screenplay Avary had written called Pandemonium Reigns.
He was also instrumental in two really critical moments in the Bonnie situation.
He was. He contributed the miraculous series of missed shots from the hidden gunman. That moment where Jules believes he's experienced divine intervention.
And then the complete opposite of that.
Right. The very mundane accidental killing in the car that happens right after, which requires them to call in a professional cleaner.
So those pivotal scenes, the ones that really define the film's balance between, existential drama and just clumsy violence, they had a foundation that Avary laid.
They did, though the main script was written later, in Amsterdam, between 1992 and 1993, while the writer was also promoting his first feature, Reservoir Dogs.
And this is where we get to the writer's stated philosophy for the story, which is really the key to why it felt so new.
Yes. He said he intentionally chose to use the oldest chestnuts of crime stories.
The most familiar tropes.
The most familiar tropes imaginable, like the classic hitman who's forced to take the boss's wife out, and then he applied them to some of real life's rules.
Just to see them unravel.
Exactly. To see how those old tropes would fall apart under realistic pressure or, a modern context.
That intentional subversion of cliché is exactly what makes the movie feel so fresh, even 30 years later. It takes a classic setup, gives it a banal dialogue about food or massages.
And then just ratchets up the existential stakes.
For instance, the boxer character, Butch Coolidge. He wasn't just invented from thin air, he was built on cinematic history.
That's right. Butch was modeled physically on the actor Aldo Ray in the 1956 film Nightfall.
Okay.
But his aggressive, stubborn demeanor was based specifically on Ralph Meeker's portrayal of the private detective Mike Hammer in the 1955 film Noir, Kiss Me Deadly.
So even the seemingly original characters are actually pastiches. They're collections of cinematic history, which fits that postmodern framework perfectly.
It does. And speaking of blending genres and real-life inspiration, the most intense and unforgettable scene, the rush to save Mia Wallace after her overdose, that wasn't pure fiction.
This is where it gets really interesting because the sources reveal that scene was inspired by a very specific real-life account.
It was. That account came from the documentary American Boy.
Yeah.
A profile of Stephen Prince. He was an actor and taxi driver.
And Prince had recounted this terrifying real event where he had to inject adrenaline directly into an overdosing woman's heart.
Yes, and he described having to use a medical dictionary and a magic marker just to guide him to find the right spot on her chest.
It's astonishing. Such a high-stakes, almost unbelievable moment of cinema came directly from documented counterculture history. It really speaks to the writer's ability to mine obscure media for gold.
Absolutely. It just reinforces the idea that the whole film is a collage of references, some from high art like Godard, some from low art like Sonny Chiba, and some from real-life tragedy documented in these niche films.
So once the script was complete, the next battle was getting it made. And the sources detail a classic Hollywood story of rejection.
They do. The production company, Jersey Films, brought the script to their partner, Columbia TriStar, who had a first-look deal. And TriStar's verdict was harsh.
They immediately put the script into turnaround.
Immediately. The head of the studio apparently found it too demented, and there was serious resistance.
To what, specifically?
Well, they were likely concerned about the nonlinear structure, which was a huge risk for a major studio. Also, the low-budget nature of it, and maybe most significantly, the graphic depiction and open discussion of heroin use.
Avery later detailed the studio's position. They called it, the worst thing ever written?
It makes no sense. Someone's dead, and then they're alive. It's too long, violent, and unfilmable.
Which is pretty much the highest possible praise for a truly original, disruptive script. It's fascinating that the studio's main objection was the exact thing that made the film revolutionary.
The nonlinear structure. It just shows how resistant the mainstream was to that kind of narrative risk.
But that rejection opened the door for Miramax films.
It did. Miramax had recently been acquired by Disney, and co-chairman Harvey Weinstein was instantly enthralled. Pulp Fiction became the first film the company completely financed from beginning to end.
And crucially, the budget was kept intentionally low, somewhere between $8 and $8.5 million.
And that was a very strategic decision. By keeping the budget modest, the producers, like Lawrence Bender, they maintained maximum creative control.
It seems like that was a choice born out of necessity, but it was elevated to a philosophy.
For sure. They knew the content was too strange for studio notes, so maintaining control was everything. And that low budget immediately set up this major financial win that completely changed how people saw independent filmmaking.
And a huge part of that was getting Bruce Willis to sign on. His involvement was financially crucial.
It was. Even though he accepted a reduced weekly salary, the producers wanted to pay all the main actors the same modest amount per week, regardless of statuses. Willis's name alone was huge overseas.
So just on the strength of Willis's global recognition, Miramax was able to guarantee $11 million for the film's worldwide rights before they even started shooting.
That's right.
Wait, so let's just stop there. That means the film had already guaranteed its profitability by a pretty significant margin just through distribution deals before principal photography was even finished.
Yeah.
That completely changed the paradigm. It showed that low-budget, high-concept, independent films weren't just passion projects anymore.
They could be immediately profitable. Bankable commodities that could secure their own financing, using A-list talent as leverage.
It was a financial blueprint for the rest of the decade. The artistic risks were mitigated by savvy business decisions and the sheer star power that the script was somehow able to attract.
What's fascinating here is how the casting choices became so deeply intertwined with the film's eventual legacy. Many of these decisions were huge gambles.
Right. They were either resurrecting stalled careers or creating instant A-listers.
Let's start with the most dramatic gamble. John Travolta as Vincent Vega.
Travolta's casting is legendary because the role was so clearly intended for someone else. It was originally written for Michael Madsen.
Who played Vic Vega in Reservoir Dogs.
And the two characters were even conceptualized as brothers, though that idea never made it to the screen. Madsen later said he regretted declining the opportunity.
And if you connect this to the bigger picture of studio interference, even Miramax co-chairman Harvey Weinstein was pushing hard for Daniel Day-Lewis in the part. He was arguing for a more, prestige actor.
But the director stood firm on Travolta. He saw something unique in pairing Travolta's past career with this character.
Which must have been a terrifying risk.
Yeah.
Travolta's career was in a major slump at the time, and the director was fighting that industry resistance.
Travolta accepted a significantly reduced rate, somewhere between $100,000 and $140,000, a fraction of his previous salary.
But the payoff was one of the greatest comeback stories in Hollywood history. The film's runaway success, plus his Oscar nomination for Best Actor, it just spectacularly revitalized his career.
It really confirmed the director's instinct that sometimes the most interesting casting choice is the one that brings the most cultural baggage to the role.
Absolutely. Then there's Samuel L. Jackson as Jules Winfield, the character who becomes the moral compass of the film.
And this role also almost went another way, which is incredible to imagine now, given how iconic Jackson's performance became.
He nearly lost the part to Paul Calderone after a lackluster first reading.
It was a true make-or-break moment. Jackson was reportedly devastated, but he managed to convince the producers to let him audition a second time.
And his subsequent performance of that final diner scene, the philosophical conversation with Pumpkin and Honey Bunny, that's what absolutely convinced the director and won him the role.
That intensity, that blend of philosophical detachment and coiled menace, it was just undeniable.
It was. And the physical look of Jules is another great example of creative serendipity meeting cultural awareness. The script originally called for Jules to have a giant afro.
But instead, the director's personal assistant mistakenly purchased a Jahiri curl wig.
The director was reportedly enraged by the mistake, but Jackson successfully persuaded him to keep it. He argued that the style had become culturally pervasive, popular through influential rap groups like NWA.
And the look itself became a point of critical discussion. One critic saw it as a comic, yet subtle, commentary on the ghettoization of Black people in Hollywood crime movies.
That layering of meaning, even in a wig, it just speaks volumes about the film's approach to cultural symbols.
We should also quickly note that Lawrence Fishburne turned down the role. He said he felt the film glamorized heroin, which provides an interesting counterpoint to the cultural risks others were willing to take.
Right. Moving to Uma Thurman as Mia Wallace. This was another case where the studio, Miramax, had favored more established names.
Like Holly Hunter or Meg Ryan.
Exactly. Other actresses considered were Robin Wright, Jennifer Beals, Marissa Tomei.
But the director was firm, insisting on Thurman after their first meeting. She was nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress and was instantly catapulted onto the A-list.
And yet, she made a very telling choice afterward. Despite that instant celebrity, she chose to intentionally avoid big-budget films for 3 years.
Right, until Batman and Robin in 1997.
And that decision really reinforces the film's anti-establishment identity. An A-list star prioritizing independent projects after a massive hit was highly unusual at the time. Her image lying on a bed with a cigarette dominated the promotional materials and became synonymous with the firm's brand of cool.
The strength of this ensemble was also so deeply supported by the major actors who took supporting roles. None more so than Bruce Willis as the boxer, Butch.
Willis's participation was, as we said, financially crucial, but sources note that his involvement also gave him new respect as an actor. It showed he was willing to take a chance on a quirky, low-budget project.
And his compensation structure was an industry game-changer. It was cleverly set up to include a percentage of the film's profits,
which reportedly earned him millions, making his modest initial weekly salary completely irrelevant in the end.
That profit-sharing model proved that A-listers could make a huge splash and huge money in independent cinema without those massive upfront fees that just sink a budget.
And for Ving Rhames as the crime boss Marcellus Wallace, his powerful performance was an immediate launchpad.
It led directly to major roles in blockbusters almost immediately.
Mission Impossible in '96, Con Air in '97. He went from a critically acclaimed character actor to a recognizable presence in massive franchises.
Finally, we have Harvey Keitel as Winston Wolfe, the cleaner. It's a small role, but completely unforgettable.
The director wrote that role specifically for Keitel, whom he admired immensely. Keitel had been instrumental in the production of Reservoir Dogs, helping secure financing and credibility.
So his casting here was a kind of metatextual nod.
It was. It referenced his previous similar role as a cleaner, or fixer, in the 1993 film Point of No Return. The sheer caliber of talent in these smaller roles just solidifies the idea that this was an actor's film, a collective reignition of cinematic talent across generations.
One of the most defining and immediate aspects of the film is its atmosphere, and that, of course, starts with the music. Let's talk about the score, or rather, the deliberate choice not to have one.
What stands out here is the complete absence of an original film score. Instead, the director curated this incredibly eclectic selection of previously recorded music.
Pulled from surf rock, classic rock and roll, soul, pop.
A bit of everything. And the most iconic choice, instantly recognizable in the opening credits, is Dick Dale's powerful rendition of Monsieur Lou.
That choice was incredibly intentional.
It was. The director chose surf music because, as he argued, it sounds like rock and roll spaghetti western music.
Yeah.
And that blend is perfect for the film.
It takes the gritty, stylized violence of the western genre.
Combines it with the raw energy of rock and roll, and gives it this specific, recognizable, yet slightly archaic sound.
And this musical approach was central to the film's critical identity. Critics noted that this combination established the film as a self-consciously cool text.
And was crucial to its postmodern knowingness. It created an apolitical, marginal subculture that existed entirely on its own terms, and that sharply contrasted with the dominant nostalgia seen in other major 1994 hits.
And when you say postmodernism in film, for anyone listening, we are talking about self-reflexivity, the film being aware that it is a film.
And pastiche, which is the practice of combining elements from various, often contradictory sources into a single work.
The contrast with Forrest Gump from the same year is the perfect way to understand this.
It is. Forrest Gump used classic pop songs to evoke straightforward nostalgia and historical context. It leads you down memory lane.
But Pulp Fiction used music to create a timeless, self-aware cultural collage. It wasn't about remembering a specific past.
No, it was about treating the entire past all of pop culture as a grab bag of references to be remixed.
That aesthetic collage is perfectly exemplified by the iconic dance scene at Jackrabbit Slim's.
Even the restaurant set itself a 1950s themed place built for $150,000 in a warehouse was pure artifice.
And the dance sequence is frequently and mistakenly assumed to be an homage to Travolta's star-making turn in Saturday Night Fever.
That's the popular interpretation. But the sources revealed the director's actual high art inspiration was the dance scene in Jean-Luc Godard's 1964 French New Wave film Bon Départ,
where a musical moment is just inserted unpredictably, nonsensically into the narrative, disrupting the flow.
The director later noted that while the scene was written with that Godard inspiration in mind, before Travolta was even cast, he embraced the opportunity to feature Travolta dancing once he was on board.
And that's where the metatextual layer becomes so thick. Critics observed that Travolta's mere presence made his entire career a powerful subtext for the scene.
Right. Regardless of the director's high art inspiration for the audience, Travolta evoking Tony Manero gave the scene this deeply layered, self-aware pop culture moment.
It confirms that this movie doesn't just reference the past, it performs with the past.
So, if we put this all together, the film is widely described as a touchstone of postmodern film, and that designation stems directly from that heavy use of self-reflexivity and homage.
It doesn't just tell a neo-noir crime story, it tells a story about all the crime stories that came before it.
It blends genres, it's simultaneously black comedy and neo-noir, but even those labels were debated.
Right, some critics pushed back.
Jeffrey O'Brien, for instance, argued it wasn't a true neo-noir because the brooding melancholy, that sense of inevitable fate, and the operatic death scenes of true noir were just completely out of place in the bright, crisp, self-aware light of Pulp Fiction.
So if he rejected that label, how did he classify the film?
He classified it instead as a guided tour of an infernal theme park decorated with cultural detritus.
That suggests its true essence lies in that chaotic, yet carefully curated collection of pop culture references, from old hard-boiled magazines to classic 1950s diners, all existing at the same time in a single, amoral narrative space. Let's turn now to some of the film's biggest lingering mysteries, which are also some of its most studied structural motifs. We have to start with the object that sets the entire chain of events in motion, the mysterious, glowing briefcase.
The briefcase is famous for its simple yet ominous three-digit lock combination, 666.
A number of the beast.
Right, which immediately imbues it with an otherworldly or religious significance. It suggests high stakes that go way beyond mere cash or jewels.
But the writer himself stated explicitly that the contents are simply a MacGuffin. And for anyone unfamiliar with that term, can you clarify what it means in cinematic terms?
Absolutely. A MacGuffin is a pure plot device. It's something that the characters care about intensely and that drives the plot forward, but its actual contents or intrinsic value are completely irrelevant to the story or the theme.
It was originally supposed to be diamonds, right?
It was, but that was eventually deemed too mundane for the tone of the movie.
So what did they actually use to film the scene where Vincent stares into the case?
For filming purposes, the case simply contained a small, hidden orange light bulb. When Vincent Vega opens the case and stares into it transfixed, that bulb is what creates that highly recognizable, otherworldly glow.
And that glow is itself a reference. The sources point out that it strongly evokes a specific film noir.
The glowing briefcase containing an atomic device in the 1955 film Kiss Me Deadly, the same film that inspired the demeanor of Butch Coolidge.
That connection is important. Since the briefcase in Kiss Me Deadly contained catastrophic violence, an atomic device, the reference supports the critical idea that the MacGuffin in Pulp Fiction symbolizes pure, potent violence itself.
Or the destructive power Marcellus Wallace wields.
Despite the writer's insistence that it's just a plot device, the fan theories persist decades later. The most popular one is that the case contained Marcellus Wallace's soul.
That theory, which involves the 666, the light, and the strange bandage on Marcellus's neck, was famously dismissed by film critic Roger Ebert as an urban legend.
Given false credibility by the early internet.
Exactly. The whole purpose of the briefcase's mystery is that its contents remain unknown. It allows the audience to project whatever meaning they wish onto it. It's the ultimate postmodern symbol.
Next, we have to examine one of the film's most powerful scenes. Jules' ritualistic recitation of a biblical passage, Ezekiel 25.7 scene, before executions.
This monologue is pivotal because it frames Jules' character arc and his eventual path to redemption.
And it raises a fascinating question about authenticity, one that goes right back to the film's central conflict between high-minded themes and low-art sources.
It does. Jules recites the passage 3 times, and his delivery changes dramatically each time. What's crucial is that only the final 2 sentences he speaks are actually similar to the real Ezekiel 25.7 in the Bible.
The first 2 sentences are completely fabricated.
They're fabricated from various biblical-sounding phrases.
So it's a fabricated quote, but it's presented within the film as sacred scripture used to justify murder. What is the actual non-biblical source?
The true source of the monologue is not the Bible. It's the 1976 martial arts film Karate Kiba, also known as The Bodyguard, starring Sonny Chiba.
Wait, so the source of Jules' most profound spiritual life-changing moment isn't a holy text, it's a cheap 1970s Sonny Chiba movie.
Yes. In that film, a killer uses an almost identical creed, only substituting Chiba the bodyguard for the Lord in the final line.
That, more than anything else, just totally encapsulates the film's postmodern identity. It treats trash culture as scripture and gives it existential weight.
Precisely. And this scene marks Jules' personal transformation, which is the film's strongest linear character arc.
Initially, his recitation is furious and self-righteous.
The mantra of a killer who has defined himself as the avenging angel. But in the final diner scene, the contrast is stark. He reflects on the passage, expressing deep ambivalence about his life of crime.
Which leads to his decision to retire.
Right. He now believes his survival after the shootout was divine intervention, a moment of clarity, not a miracle of his own doing.
So his reflection signals a genuine awareness that there might be a framework of value and meaning beyond the nihilistic culture of violence they inhabit.
Absolutely. The very fact that he's questioning his interpretation, moving from I am the wrath of God to maybe I'm the shepherd, is the entire point of his storyline. The fabricated quote is still the vehicle for authentic spiritual growth.
Let's move to a pervasive structural motif that commentators have picked up on. This bizarre running gag or structural device involving the use of the bathroom.
Yes, the narrative repeatedly uses characters taking a private moment, a bathroom break, to introduce these dramatic, world-changing events. It suggests contingency and instability.
The most direct illustration of this is through Vincent Vega. His entire fate is intrinsically linked to his toilet breaks.
He takes 3 significant bathroom breaks throughout the movie, and each one ends in a major threat or disaster, culminating in his death during the 3rd instance. It's a recurring, deadly joke at his expense.
That structure alone tells a story about the precariousness of their existence. Let's trace those 3 instances.
The first occurs at the diner with Jules. They're having a philosophical conversation, which is abruptly interrupted when Vincent goes to the bathroom reading a book.
And while he's gone, Pumpkin and Honey Bunny begin their robbery,
putting Jules in immediate danger and forcing his moment of clarity.
The second time is even more disastrous. He's taking Mia Wallace out for the evening. While he's in the bathroom at her house, worrying, Mia finds his heroin stash,
mistakes it for cocaine, snorts it, and overdoses.
Yeah.
This forces Vincent into that frantic, life-saving adrenaline shot sequence.
And finally, the 3rd instance seals his fate.
Vincent is at Butch's apartment on a stakeout. He emerges from the toilet with his book and is shot dead instantly by Butch, who has returned to retrieve his watch.
This consistent, almost ritualistic narrative structure suggests that the modern world is utterly contingent, transformed disastrously in the instant you are not looking.
The moment you are distracted, or literally indisposed, the world changes, and not for the better. It's a pointed commentary on cinematic violence, too, showing that death can arrive in the most banal, undramatic moments, reducing the dramatic tension to total absurdity. To discuss the movie's legacy, we must address one of the most debated and, frankly, difficult sequences in the entire film. The basement scene involving Butch and Marcellus.
Right. Butch, after double-crossing Marcellus and accidentally killing his opponent in the boxing ring, is pursued. They both end up captured by Maynard, the pawnshop owner, and his accomplice, Zed,
and are taken to the basement.
As the sources detail, Maynard and Zed capture them at gunpoint, binding and gagging them. Maynard and Zed then take Marcellus into another room to begin their horrific actions. This is an extremely disturbing event, and it is vital we approach this analysis with gravity and sympathy for Marcellus.
Indeed. The scene's narrative purpose, however, centers on Butch's moral awakening. Butch is able to break free and has a clear opportunity to escape and save himself.
But he makes a profound moral choice to return and rescue Marcellus. He sacrifices his guaranteed freedom for a sense of honor or justice that had been absent in his nihilistic, money-driven life.
And his choice of weapon in the pawn shop is highly significant, packed with allusions.
He sees a hammer, a baseball bat, and a chainsaw, tools of violence critics have connected to films like The Toolbox Murders or The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Representing senseless or utilitarian horror?
Yeah.
But he chooses the katana, the traditional Japanese sword. This selection is seen by critics as identifying him with honorable heroes and representing a culture with a defined moral code.
So the katana symbolizes Butch's rejection of the nihilistic path. He uses it to kill Maynard and free Marcellus, who in turn shoots Zed.
Afterward, Marcellus tells Butch to tell absolutely no one about the incident and to leave Los Angeles forever. He confirms their score is now cool or even.
This sequence, despite its severity, has been widely analyzed in terms of film history. Critics noted that this horrific scenario is presented as merely the single weirdest day of Butch's life.
Which speaks to the controversial nature of the film's approach. It reduces profound horror and tragedy to an episodic plot point in a stylized crime caper.
And the source material for the captors was described as 2 sadistic honkies straight out of Deliverance. A very specific allusion.
A very specific allusion to the shocking 1972 film. Zed's name is also a reference to a Sean Connery character in the 1974 science fiction film, Zardoz.
The use of these extremely dark references, almost like throwaway jokes in the context of the larger crime story, really cemented the film's identity as a deeply complex, often criticized piece of self-aware media.
Beyond this intense moment, the film's sweeping industry and cultural influence is just undeniable. It first won the Palme d'Or at Cannes in May 1994.
Which generated a massive wave of publicity and buzz months before its U.S. commercial release. It established it as an art house hit with crossover potential.
That Cannes win was absolutely key to its marketing and prestige. The film went on to receive 7 Oscar nominations, ultimately winning Best Original Screenplay for the writer in Avery.
And critically, it became the single most influential American movie of the 1990s.
Its success triggered a myriad of clones and knockoffs that quickly adopted its key structural elements. The nonlinear timeline, the self-aware genre blending, and that unique, hyper-stylized dialogue.
Right, the dialogue that often focuses on banal topics before snapping back to sudden violence.
That influence wasn't just limited to Hollywood studios trying to copy the formula. In Britain, not only was the film a huge hit, but the book form of the screenplay became a UK bestseller.
The most successful in UK publishing history, which shows that the writing itself, the dialogue, the structure, was seen as a form of literature that audiences wanted to study and consume.
Exactly. And the continuing cultural resonance just confirms its iconic status. Quotes like Vincent's confusion over a royale with cheese.
Or Marcellus's threat, "I'm gonna get medieval on your ass."
They became widely adopted catchphrases almost instantly. The image of Vincent and Jules in suits pointing their guns became instantly familiar iconography.
A great example of that enduring iconography is how the guerrilla artist Banksy created a London mural replacing their guns with bananas.
A piece that was later controversially painted over by transport workers. It shows the film's characters had become so ingrained in popular culture they could be used as shorthand for social commentary.
And Jules's modified Ezekiel recitation was voted the fourth greatest movie speech of all time in a 2004 poll.
Its reach even extended to other cinematic universes. In Captain America, The Winter Soldier in 2014, Samuel L. Jackson's character, Nick Fury, as the passage inscribed on his own gravestone.
Connecting the spiritual transformation of a hitman to the fate of a global intelligence director.
Finally, let's look at the film's modern conflicts regarding its ownership. The distribution rights have moved around quite a bit over the years.
From Miramax, which was owned by Disney, to Filmyard Holdings, then to the Qatari-owned BIN Media Group, and now Viacom CBS Paramount Skydance, has a major stake in Miramax's library, including Pulp Fiction.
This shifting ownership led to a highly publicized modern conflict just a few years ago. In 2021, Miramax filed a lawsuit against the director over his plan to release NFTs.
Non-fungible tokens, based on uncut scenes and the original handwritten script. And that legal dispute forced details about the film's creation into the public domain.
It's fascinating that 30 years later, a film made for just over $8 million is still generating complex legal battles in the world of digital assets.
The dispute was eventually settled in 2022.
It was, with an agreement for the parties to collaborate on future projects. But the fact that a major studio would fight so fiercely over the right to monetize digital collectibles based on the original script confirms the film's ongoing commercial value and complexity. It proves the cultural legacy remains intensely valuable, even in the age of Web 3. So, to put it all together, the film's status now is, well, Pulp Fiction is preserved in the National Film Registry as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. That confirms its legacy far outstrips its initial identity as mere pulp fiction.
It's now officially part of the canon.
It is, and its greatest enduring effect is how it fundamentally redefined cinematic structure. It proved that a modestly budgeted, nonlinear independent film could become a blockbuster and completely change the industry paradigm. It truly ushered in a new, self-aware era of genre-blending filmmaking that is still being copied today.
And given that the chaotic, non-linear world of this film shows that profound tragedy like Mia's near-fatal overdose and unexpected grace-like Jules' survival are always just a bathroom breakaway, and given that the climax of Butch's storyline hinges entirely on a sudden choice between nihilism and honor, we might ask ourselves this. Does the film ultimately suggest that personal redemption is only achievable once we completely reject the hyper-stylized violence that makes for such compelling viewing, or is that violence simply the necessary catalyst for finding a moral path? Thanks for listening.